For most of us, McIntosh is a brand that needs no introduction. Love them or hate them, you know the name, you know the history, and even if you don't know that, I bet you recognize those damn sexy blue meters. Now, I initially contacted McIntosh before our Bowers & Wilkins 801 signature review because how could I not at least try for the opportunity to pair two such iconic brands? So, graciously, McIntosh sent its newest solid-state stereo preamplifier, the C55, and the crazy powerful, just not brand spanking new, MC312 stereo amplifier. The C55, it's a highly customizable feature-packed stereo preamp with 16 inputs made up of both analog and digital connections. It even has HDMI as standard. I know, don't tell audiophiles. You get 7 analog inputs made up of balanced and unbalanced options. There are 7 digital inputs, including 2 coaxial, 2 optical, 1 MCT, 1 USB, and an HDMI input with ARC support. The digital inputs, which are part of McIntosh's DA2 digital module, are tied to a quad-balanced 32-bit DAC or digital to analog converter, and they can accept high-res audio signals including DSD-512 and DXD-384. Throw in 2 user-configurable PHONO preamp inputs and there's your 16. If you're still rocking tape decks or reel-to-reel, the C55 has a processor loop, and using the processor loop, you can also add a separate EQ or room correction device. There are 3 complete sets of preamp outputs. The 3 preamp outs allow the C55 to connect to your choice of McIntosh amplification or a third-party amp or even a subwoofer. You can also let the C55 control multiple amplifiers and thus other stereo systems in different rooms using these same outputs. Now, despite having an Ethernet port, the C55 is not a modern streaming music player or preamp. The Ethernet port is used for updates and control using the Macintosh Connect app, which, by the way, works on Android and iOS devices. While the app gives users control over the C55, very similar to using the included remote, there is no Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, AirPlay, or just any streaming app support natively, but go figure, the Macintosh is still Roon tested. If you want these kind of modern conveniences, you must connect a third-party device to the C55 or consider purchasing Macintosh's MB25 Bluetooth transceiver or the MS500 music streamer. Moving over to the MC312, which is a standalone stereo amplifier that produces 300 watts per channel into 8, 4, or 2 ohms, thanks to Macintosh's autoformer design that essentially renders a loudspeaker's fluctuating impedance moot. The stereo amplifier has an incredibly low distortion at 0.005%. And while a lack of headroom is not something I typically worry about when discussing amps of this caliber, especially ones for Macintosh, they've gone ahead and improved the 312's dynamic headroom by a reported 27% over its predecessor due to increased filter capacity. You will also find a full complement of balanced and unbalanced inputs and outputs. The latter can be used for bi-amping or even adding a powered subwoofer to your system if your existing preamp lacks that capability, which is something I'm not really sure that I've seen offered on a stereo amplifier. You also get Macintosh's PowerGuard and Sentry monitor, which protects your loudspeakers and the amp from clipping or damaging electrical shorts. Now, we've had the Mac system for a few months. That's about 2 or 3 dog years, or if you're a pilot in training, I don't know, like 1,000,000 trillion hours. Basically, plenty of time for everything to break in and for me to get to know it. For sure, it's been enough time for me to connect a variety of gear during our evaluation period. So, starting with speakers, standouts include Bowers & Wilkins 801D4 signature and 705 signatures, Yamaha's NS-800A bookshelf speakers, our clipped Cornwall 4s, yes, we still have them, and our reference SVS Titan towers, and I gotta say, there was not a bad fit in the bunch. I'm a big fan of 2.1 systems, and I absolutely love it when a product lets you go beyond just music listening and explore a little bit more of the home theater experience, which the C55 does, thanks to HDMI. And we were fortunate enough to test this with 2 different TVs, the new QM851G from TCL that we just reviewed, and of course our reference Sony X90L. Both worked flawlessly. I also used our Apple TV 4K, Eversolo A8, Cambridge Audio CXN100, Mini DSP SHD, and Audio-Technica's LP140 XP with our Ortofon LVB cartridge to round out the evaluation gear I used on the Macintosh. Now, one of the features that initially drew me to the C55 was its 8-band analog equalizer, each band allowing for plus or minus 12 decibels of level correction, enabling users to, tailor the speaker's sound to taste. And the addition of EQ, it goes well beyond what you're used to seeing, typical tone and balance adjustments, all of which you can place into a neutral position so that the sound is not changed. This makes A/B testing so much easier and is an absolute godsend for a reviewer like me. And while there's a limit to the level of adjustment you can apply to each band, the physical dials are variable. You won't feel any stops or step while adjusting, apart from the hard stops at plus or minus 12 dB and the neutral setting at 12 o'clock. Without a more tactile feel to the dials, fine-tuning or repeating previous adjustments is kind of frustrating, if not next to impossible. While I get that not everyone's going to need to constantly fuss with their adjustments or EQ once arriving at a, quote, happy place, if you tinker with your settings like it's your job, this isn't the easiest system to use if you're trying to replicate your results days or weeks later. Had the dials been stepped, I think this would have gone a long way in helping improve the user experience, at least from my perspective. But despite all of this, I have to stress the EQ controls work without fail, which I was able to verify using measurements. While the max EQ did work, I preferred the results from my mini DSP, more modern approach to equalization. Thanks to its extraordinary input-output flexibility, you can add a mini DSP to the C55. That said, if you don't need multiple bands of EQ, or you think EQ is just the work of the devil, you can save yourself some money and get the McIntosh C49 preamp, which, I get it, it's not exactly the same as the C55, but maybe worth a look. Now, describing the sound of the McIntosh gear, specifically the MC312 amplifier, is almost impossible, especially when it's powering a pair of correctly set up speakers. I mean, it has enough power to control any speaker with little effort and virtually no distortion. You may even think that your speakers sound different through the McIntosh, when actually it's more plausible that the system, the 312 specifically, is just simply giving your speakers the ability to sound their best all of the time. I'm not saying that the MC312 body snatched the full-range dynamic Titans or Cornwalls, turning them into like soft-serve ice cream, or that a two-way bookshelf like the Yamaha suddenly sounded like a full-range tower of power. No, it didn't do that. The change you're going to experience is all about control. Bass notes have greater immediacy and focus. Kick drums, or like the pluck of a double bass, for example, they're going to start and stop, when appropriate, with less bloat or bloom. Texture throughout the bass and mid-range, it's going to be more defined, more audible, and highs, even through, so-called bright speakers like the 801 signatures, they never glare or shout. And the separation of instruments and performers within any soundstage, it's just always rendered with more focus, allowing me to track and follow the music in ways I just don't always experience. And A being the MC312 against anything else was the oral equivalent of watching an apprentice carry out a task for the first time versus witnessing a master go about their life's work. The system's focus on quality and control of the signal extends to the C55. There's a synergy when pairing McIntosh gear together that makes the desire to tinker, to try and achieve a different sound, kind of pointless. Perfect example, DACs, which have become like a magic bullet for enthusiasts lately. The built-in DAC in any system is just never supposed to be as good as getting a dedicated DAC. I mean, everyone knows that. Not so fast. There simply wasn't a big enough difference in sound quality when comparing the C55's built-in DAC to, say, the one inside the Eversolo A8. Does that mean the A8 is as good as a McIntosh? I mean, it's a plus if you already own an A8, I suppose. I just don't see the point in DAC shopping if you're interested in building a McIntosh system. And this kind of feeling repeated itself each time I added a component expecting to arrive at a better sound, because it didn't happen. The more I pared down and scaled back using just what was already internal to the C55, the better the experience was. It's not as if you can't use a separate DAC. I mean, you can. I just don't think it's necessary. I feel the same way about the built-in PHONO preamp. It's phenomenal. So adding separate anything in this case sounds like a great way to just go broke chasing after what McIntosh already gives you. But I do have to pump the brakes a minute, because when it comes to streaming music or enjoying more modern conveniences, it's true. The C55 needs more than a little help. McIntosh would love to sell you their MB25 Bluetooth transceiver or the MS500 music streamer. Since we weren't sent those to test, probably because they knew we'd drag them for being, quote, optional extras at the C55's already premium price point, here are some alternatives that may save you a lot of money. Using a streamer like the CX100 connected digitally to the C55's built-in DAC works and sounds great, but you can save even more by doing the exact same thing with a WIM streamer. You're welcome. That's got to be worth like a $2 super thanks. Now, as great as I believe the C55 to be, it's actually the one part of the McIntosh chain that I think I could do without. I know. I just got done telling you it's amazing, but hear me out. For me, it's just not the right preamp, because much of its traditional, more analog-focused features, like the EQ, are just wasted on me. If you recall, I did say I was initially intrigued by the C55's EQ, but ultimately came to the conclusion that I preferred the results from my mini DSP. If this sounds like something you may run up against, you could save almost half by going with the McIntosh C49 preamp. You're going to lose meters and some input-output flexibility, but even if you spring for the updated DA2 module with HDMI, you'll likely have plenty money left over for a mini DSP SHD, not to mention maybe even a grand or two to put towards the MC312. Or you could be a little naughty and do what I'm thinking of doing next. I know the MX200 processor is a home theater product and not necessarily a hi-fi one, but it costs $3,000 less than the C55. The MX200 has analog inputs, including a PHONO preamp, and it gives me more HDMI and digital flexibility. Plus, and this is huge for me, it has Dirac room correction. Yeah, I know, I'll be giving up those iconic blue meters, some analog inputs, and the ability to say I am enjoying best-in-class THD figures, but I think the gains, at least in my case, are going to be worth it. And just like Carl needs everything to play at 100 dB or louder all of the time, when it comes to the MC312 amplifier, I just have to have it. The MC312 is, without a second's hesitation, one of the finest stereo amps I've ever heard, joining the ranks of my former Mark Levinson number 433 and 53s. And I love it as much as my Krell Evolution 402E that I had in a previous life. It's that good. For a more apples-to-apples comparison, there is, of course, the Classe Delta series. And sound-wise, I think there's just better texture and control with the Mac. I mean, the Delta series has really good kind of snap and it wows you, but I just feel like the Mac gear is a little bit more nuanced and even keel top to bottom. And if you're waiting on that Classe Delta review, look, you guys know we had it, and after months of waiting and me having to do various part swaps, and then for me, the last straw was them announcing a brand new replacement preamp without any warning, right as I was trying to wrap up my review of the original, I just had to give up. I said, you know what, guys, I'm out. So you want my thoughts? I honestly don't know what the future holds for Classe. As a brand, I don't think their parent company does either. Suffice to say, if I had 10 to 20 grand burning a hole in my pocket for, a cost no object hi-fi system, I don't think I'd shop Classe. The McIntosh gear is better and more likely to be supported 10 minutes, 10 months, 10 years from now. But if brands like McIntosh, Classe, or Mark Levinson aren't in the cards for you, but you still want something good, I really would encourage you to look at EMOTIVA's XPA line. We've covered it on the channel, and I'm not going to hype EMOTIVA and say that they're the same or that the XPA line will just destroy Mac. It won't. But it is great value for money, and it works well with difficult-to-drive speakers, and, it's even got a little blue in it. But I can't wrap up this review without addressing Advanced Paris, the new kid on the block. Look, I haven't heard them, so I'm not going to speculate on their sound quality. Maybe we'll give them a listen at some point. Until then, your guess is as good as mine. As for a few more obtainable options that maybe aren't as powerful, AUDIOLAB and ARCAM spring to mind. The ARCAM A25, I know it's an integrated, but it may be the closest facsimile in tone and just kind of general approach to sound compared to McIntosh, at least that I've heard. The 9000A from AUDIOLAB, very similar story. Now, neither amp are as powerful nor perfect pairings for every speaker, but if you want to enjoy a small percentage of that sound quality that McIntosh brings to the table, table, these are the two more budget-friendly options that just come to mind. Oh, so by the time you see this review, I hope I'm done grieving the loss of the McIntosh C55 and MC312 because they've likely been returned to Mac HQ. And even if they never find their way back to me, I just want them to know I won't forget you. All jokes aside, I realize that Macintosh gear, it may not be for everyone, and that for 99% of us, including me, they will likely remain aspirational. But you don't get to celebrate 75 years in business and become one of the most iconic brands in history by just being average. So that is it. Finally, right? That's finally my thoughts on Macintoshes C55 and MC312. Oh boy, I hope it was worth it, but now it's time for you guys to tell me what you thought. Leave a comment down below. If you have a question or if I missed something, of course I probably did, go ahead, leave that down below too. You know, Christy's going to be rifling through them. You never know. Could end up in next week's Unplugged where we find out if Christy even, liked them. If they're her cup of tea. She liked them. I don't know. We'll find out. Anyway, if you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Go ahead, ring that bell so that you're notified when new videos come out. If you use any of the links Christy's left for you down below, know that that's a great way that you've continued to show your support for this channel and the work that we both do here. And both of us thank you very, very much. Follow me on Instagram at Recovering Audiophile. And that is it for me today. So remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video.